Hello, everybody. It's Coach Cortez with Recruit University. We're back again with another edition of the Recruit University Success Call. I'm very honored today to bring a special guest. We have none other than the author of Saturday Millionaires, and she's been on Forbes. She's also been on ESPN, SB Nation, Bleacher Report. We have today Miss Kristi Dosh. Kristi, welcome.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Tell everyone a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I am a recovering attorney, is what I call myself. I do not practice law anymore, but I was a corporate attorney for a number of years before I moved into sports media. I had been blogging on the side about legal issues in sports because I'm a huge sports fan and I played sports growing up. And I ended up getting hired by ESPN to be their sports business reporter. Gosh, it's been 14 years ago now. And so I left practicing law and I became a sports business reporter. And I have been doing that ever since. And like you mentioned, my first book I wrote was called Saturday Millionaires, and it was about the business side, specifically of college football, but also a little bit into how the finances of college athletics work in general. And then now I have a brand new NIL book, the Athletes NIL Playbook, because I have been covering NIL for a lot longer than we've been talking about it the last few years. In fact, one of the first things I ever reported on was the Ed O'Bannon case back in '09, 10, something like that. We started talking about that case, and that was about the use of his name, image, and likeness in the EA Sports college basketball games. And so I feel like when NIL, finally came into being 4 years ago now, that was a really full circle moment for me in my career as a sports business reporter. And I have been reporting on and speaking on NIL since then, and I teach multiple NIL classes in a number of different departments at the University of Florida. So
Wow.
I'm really passionate about educating athletes and parents about how to navigate this very interesting new system and new way of doing things in college athletics.
Wow. Well, you said a lot there. Um, all the parents, all the students who want to go to college now, that's exactly what they want. They automatically say NIL, get us NIL money. How do they go about getting NIL money?
I say it's not one size fits all. I always sit down with athletes and I start by asking them about the things they already do that they enjoy. So, for example, if they're a gamer, there are ways to make money playing video games, whether that's working directly with the video game brands or it's being on sites where you can play against other people and earn money for playing. I've got female athletes I've worked with who they share their outfit of the day every day. And not only can they do social media marketing deals with those clothing brands, but they can use affiliate marketing things like there's one called Like It to Know It, where you share your outfit, you show people where to buy what you're wearing, and then you get a kickback if people buy those articles of clothing. I've seen student athletes who have created their own board game,
Wow.
written their own book. They are performing their music and getting paid for it. So I want to know, what does the athlete already do that they enjoy? Because they always come to me and they want to do social media marketing, but then you get to talking to them and they hate social media, they hate posting, they never do it. And it's like, well, don't force yourself into a box you don't fit in, because
Mhm.
there really are so many ways to monetize your NIL. And I think in the book, I ended up coming up with more than a dozen different paths you can go down, and you might choose just one of them or you might try out several.
Okay, great, great. Yeah, because it's basically marketing at the end of the day, right?
It is, and really about, I think, leaning into your hobbies and how can you monetize your hobby. I mean, quite frankly, that's what I did. My hobby was writing, and then I figured out how to monetize my blog, and that eventually led me on a different career path. And I've seen that happen for college athletes already. We're only 4 years in, and I can give you several examples off the top of my head of athletes who, because of what they did with their NIL, what they decided to do after graduation changed, and they set themselves up really well for that path after sport and after graduation. So that's what I love about NIL. It's not the stories about the guy who's driving the Lamborghini or who's getting $10 million to go play at what school. No, parents want that for your kids. I would want that too if it were me. But there's so many athletes out there who have opportunities to do really meaningful things with their NIL that aren't the big flashy things we see in the headlines.
Good point. I like that you brought it up. So let's say they don't go D1. Let's say they go D2, D3. Can they still get an NIL deal?
can. I made it a point. I wanted to do these case studies in my book. And so it took me over 2 years to write this book because I spent time
Mhm.
talking to athletes about the different ways they were monetizing their NIL. And I wanted all three divisions to be represented because I went to a D3. And so there's a soft spot in my heart for D3s. And so we have some D2 and D3 athletes who are featured in the book doing social media marketing, selling their own merchandise, some really cool things. So you absolutely don't have to be a household name or have a huge social media following or go to a big brand name school. I mean, the joke at my school was always you would tell people, I go to Oglethorpe University, and they would say, I've never heard of it. And we would
Yeah,
say, they've never heard of you either.
I say that as well. Yeah, a lot of the guys that I recruit, I send them schools and say, I never heard of that school. I said, well, have they heard of you? That's the whole point, right? I love it. So tell me a little bit about revenue sharing. What is that all about?
Oh, so you will see how that's going to play out. Beginning July 1st, schools will be able to offer revenue sharing to student athletes up to $20.5 million in this first year. It is only Division One and only schools that opt in. So schools don't have to choose to be a part of this. We expect all the Power Four institutions will be part of it. I would expect most everyone who plays, FBS football at some level to participate, maybe like a few FCS. I haven't heard a whole lot on that front. Some mid-major basketball programs for sure are already talking about it and the ways in which maybe they can recruit against some of the basketball powerhouses that also have football and have to devote a lot of their revenue sharing to that. But it's going to look really different from one school to the next. I've been keeping track of as schools announce their revenue sharing plans. Who are they paying outside of football and men's basketball? We've
Mhm.
seen gymnastics, volleyball, baseball, softball,
Wow.
men's ice hockey. So we are seeing it trickle down beyond just football, men's basketball, but we do expect that, at a school that plays high level football, you're going to see probably 75% go to football, maybe 10 to 15% to men's basketball, and the rest sort of split on the sports that that school might be known for or is emphasizing. But it really does look different from one campus to the next.
Okay. And how do you think that'll impact recruiting?
Oh, so it's going to be interesting. The roster limits sort of come into play here too. If a
Okay.
school opts in and decides they want to revenue share, then they also are now subject to the new roster limits. Football is obviously the one that gets a lot of attention because the new roster limit is going to be 105.
Mhm.
Now, that's going to allow them to have more scholarships than they've had in the past. They were at 85 at that FBS level. Now
Mhm.
they can have the full 105 on scholarship. But a lot of folks were carrying rosters that were 130, 150. I saw a 180. So
Mhm.
those athletes, and we can kind of dig in, there's going to be a way to protect the ones that are there right now.
Mhm.
Going forward, you're going to see those roster sizes shrink. And so there's been a lot of talk about how, being a walk on is not going to be a thing anymore. But also, I think, the talent's going to get dispersed a little bit because a team that was carrying 180 isn't going to be able to stockpile all those players
Yeah.
anymore. And so I think it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. And for the next few years, guys who were already on the team who are potentially going to get cut because of these new roster limits, they can get this tag called a designated student athlete where they won't count against the roster. And actually, that will follow them for the rest of their college eligibility. So it's going to be weird, I would say, for the next few years as that tag gets applied and those folks move on and graduate. And then, going forward, I think we're going to see the talent disperse a little more.
Okay. So yeah, that's definitely a D1 problem there.
Yeah, that is
So
a D1
what would you
problem.
say to
Yes.
parents? What would you say to parents as they try to transition from high school to college? What advice would you give them?
Oh, get everything in writing. As a
Mm,
lawyer, like I cannot emphasize this enough. I have heard from so many parents since NIL started, and it's heating up now with revenue sharing. And they
mhm,
drop into my inbox or into my DMs, and they send me a copy of a signed contract, and they say, does it really say this? Or they say, hey, we had this problem. And I say, well, what does the contract say? And they tell
mhm,
me, well, there was no contract, but we were on campus and they promised us this. And coach said this to me. We saw this with the Matt Sluka situation at
mhm.
UNLV. There was an article about a bunch of USC players who got on campus and didn't get the things they were promised. We had Jaden Rashada at UF, which is my law school. I'm an alum of their law school. And if you're watching on video, you can see all my UF stuff in the background. There was a written contract in that case, and he, had the contract terminated. So having something in writing is not foolproof. We'll see what happens in the Jada Rashada case since there was a written contract. But the problems I see coming up over and over are either because there was no written contract or because they signed it without having anyone look at it. And so get it in writing and please have an attorney take a look at it so you're not giving away more than you have to and you're not restricting your movement. Because with these revenue sharing contracts, they are going to try to keep you at the school and try to keep you from transferring, and you want to keep your options open.
Right. So let me ask you this question. What do you think about the deal that happened with the quarterback from Tennessee, went to UCLA, holding out for more money? Could you see more of that?
Yes and no. In that case, it didn't really work out for him. And so it's
Hmm.
maybe a cautionary tale about what you can and cannot get. I would say another interesting aspect of that case was that his brother decided to go with him. He had
Hmm.
committed to Arkansas. He had signed a deal with Arkansas's collective. He had not received any money yet, my understanding, but decided he wanted to go to UCLA with Nico. Well, now the collective has made it very public that they intend to go after him for a clause in that contract that called for what we call liquidated damages. So they essentially want to be compensated for losing him, even though they never paid him anything and he never played there. We'll see how that works out and whether they can actually enforce that. The attorneys I've talked to don't feel real confident about the collective's ability to enforce that. But
Hmm.
now that we're moving into revenue sharing, we're seeing buyout clauses like we see in coaches' contracts to try to keep people from transferring. So it's a brave new world. Even the coaches and the ADs don't know how all of this is going to turn out.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing to have is these buyout clauses because the transfer portal is really crazy right now. So as far as NIL go, I mean, I know that's the topic that most students want to know about. And you said in your book, there's a bunch of different strategies. How can they get their hands on your book?
So it came out early. It wasn't supposed to come out until July 2nd, but then when the House settlement happened, my publisher said, you know what, we're going to go ahead and release it. So
Okay,
they actually released it this past week. I've got a copy sitting on my desk.
congratulations.
Yeah, athletes NIL playbook. So my baby came early. I'm so excited to finally have it in my hands and to get into the hands of athletes because the final chapter does actually talk about revenue sharing. I had to turn this in before the House settlement was approved, before we knew 100% that revenue sharing was coming, but schools were already sending guys revenue sharing contracts and asking them to sign them. And so I took a look at a number of those contracts. Other attorney friends of mine did and shared their experiences here as well. But it talks about how to hire an agent, how to ask the right questions to make sure you end up with someone credible. This has
Mhm.
been sort of my soapbox in the NIL space is that anyone can call themselves an NIL agent. My dad, who worked in printing his whole career, could walk out his front door tomorrow and call himself an NIL agent. And he's probably heard me talk about NIL enough. He'd do an okay job. But the point is anyone can call themselves an NIL agent, and there are a lot of bad actors out there. So I talk about whether you even need one and how to hire the right person. I talk about working with collectives. And then for athletes who maybe aren't at that level, they're not getting revenue sharing, they're not doing big deals with the collective. There's so much in here about how to make money, social media marketing, or teaching camps, clinics, lessons. I didn't play in college. I played softball my whole life. I was a
Right.
pitcher. I decided not to play in college. So I actually did a lot of one-on-one pitching lessons when I was
Mhm.
a college student as a way to make money. And this would have been in the early aughts because I graduated college in 2003. I made great money back then. People pay even more for private lessons
Yeah,
now. And so there's actually a track athlete in my book who's been making really good money, teaching little kids how to run track. So there's a lot of opportunity even for those who aren't making the 6 and 7 figures with the collective or revenue sharing.
absolutely incredible. So, why do you think it's important to get an NIL agent?
Don't think everybody needs one. I think everyone wants one because they think it means more NIL deals will come in the door.
Mhm.
But unfortunately, a lot of agents sort of just like collect their portion of it when it comes into your DMs. You tell them about it. Maybe they negotiate the contract, maybe they don't. Maybe they don't give you a whole lot of guidance on it, and then they take their 15%, 20%, whatever it is. I
Mhm.
don't think you need an agent unless you have a lot of inbound requests that you can't manage. You've built up a brand already. You've got a social media presence, especially, or you are getting 6 figure offers from the collective from revenue sharing. Even then, you can get by with just a lawyer who can look at those agreements. But if you're wanting to do brand deals, I
Mhm.
think that's when you start looking at getting an agent. But a lot of agents that I know have thresholds. They're not going to take you until you have a certain following. It's usually in the tens of thousands, if not the hundreds of thousands, depending on who the agent is, or they think you're going to go in the one of the major drafts, the NFL draft, the NBA draft, the WNBA draft, and they might be willing to do your NIL marketing to build a relationship with you in the hopes that you use them when you go pro for your pro contract. So it looks a little different for every student athlete, but it's definitely not something everybody needs. Everybody, however, does need to know how to get in touch with an attorney who can review that contract. And look, I don't do it. You can't pay me to do that. I'm not selling you services.
Uh-huh.
But I keep a list on my website of attorneys that I have vetted at some level who are doing this and reviewing contracts for athletes who are going to make sure you're not giving away rights you shouldn't be giving away. I've seen athletes sign deals where they're giving up use of their name, image, and likeness. They
Mhm.
call it in perpetuity. That means
Mhm.
forever. So 20
Wow.
years from now, when you're doing something totally different and you don't want this brand to be associated with you anymore, but
Mhm.
you signed a contract that gave up those rights while you were in college, that kind of stuff can really
Mhm.
follow you around. And so that's why I think it's so important to have these things looked at, because there are a lot of, I will call them predatory clauses in some of these contracts.
Well, I've learned a lot in just this short 15 minutes. Yeah, you're right. When you're young and you get that opportunity in front of you, you're going to try to just jump on it and take
Yeah.
whatever
You're
comes
like,
to
give
you.
me
So,
the money. I've
exactly.
got a good story I'll share quick with everybody. I
Sure,
had a
good.
parent very early on in NIL drop into my inbox. Her son had signed the contract without talking to her about it. So talk to your kids, tell them to let you know before they sign the contract.
Mhm.
And she said to me, I think there's a clause in there that prevents him from selling his own merchandise. Can you take a look at it? Because him and his best friend over the summer had developed a logo. His friend was a graphic designer, and they really did come up with this very slick, awesome logo for this athlete. He was a football player at a Power Five program, and he wanted to start selling t-shirts and hoodies and that sort of thing with this logo on it. And him and his friend had built out this whole storefront they were going to launch online. And then he found out that in his collective contract, and the collective was paying him $40,000. So an insignificant amount of money, but also he was giving up way more rights than he should have given up for $40,000. One of the clauses said that if he ever created his own logo or trademark of any kind, that they owned it, not
Wow.
him, and that they had the sole right to market any merchandise created by him. So he actually did not legally have the right to put up his own storefront and sell it. He had to take that logo and his merchandise idea to the collective and let them do it. Now, and they had basically said, we will give you a percentage of it. But the contract didn't say what percentage. It basically said they would negotiate it later. So he didn't even know what percentage of it he was going to get. And that's the kind of stuff that is like buried in these contracts that if you don't have somebody look at it, you are signing away more than you realize.
Mhm. And $40,000 sounds like a lot of money, right? Especially to a young kid. Like us,
Yeah,
more
but
money they probably never seen.
think about you're in the NFL and you're killing it at
Yeah.
that level, and a collective you did a deal with 6 years ago is still, they own your logo and they're selling merchandise with it, and you're getting who knows what
Peanuts.
percentage of it. It
Yeah.
is going to follow you for a long time, and we've seen some NFL players now already who are suing people they did NIL deals with in college. Jervon Dexter is in my book because he signed with a company that gave him an advance,
Mhm.
and sort of the fine print of that advance was, in the end, they get a piece of his NFL contracts going forward, and the amount he will end up repaying to them is astronomically more than they gave him. It is not a normal like interest rate or rate of return. And so
Mhm.
he is suing that company. But just know that people talk a good game, but you got to look out for you. They're not looking out for you. They are looking out for them and their company. So I don't care what they tell you and how good it sounds. You need somebody watching out for you. So you need that attorney or agent who's going to look over these things before you sign them so they don't follow you the rest of your life and into your pro career.
Wow. Kristi, that's great stuff. Listen, kids, or not kids, young adults, students, parents, make sure you're listening to what she's saying. You got to protect yourself. Okay. You can't go out there and just get super excited and have emotion. You got to use logic, right? So, Kristi, where can they get this book again?
pretty much everywhere now. It's on Amazon and Barnes& and Noble and Books A Million and all the major retailers. And hopefully will be starting to show up in Barnes& and Noble physical stores soon because
Uh-huh.
it came out early. Publishers having to get shipments out and having to figure out exactly what that's going to look like. But it's online pretty much everywhere now.
I'm excited to read it. I've learned, like I said, I learned a lot in a very little bit of time. It's definitely a must-have if you're going to be playing sports in college because you want to protect yourself long term. Listen to the attorney; she knows what she's talking about. So, how can people find you, Kristi? What's your socials?
Yeah, I'm on all the major platforms as Sports Biz Miss. That's MISS at the end. I'm on Instagram, X, TikTok, Facebook. What I do pretty much all of it. I don't do Snapchat, although I think I have the username reserved, but I do the rest of it. And I'm on there pretty regularly if you need to find me.
All right, and what's your website?
It is businessofcollegesports.com. So tons of NIL content on there as well. And the book has its own website, the athletes NIL playbook.com. And there are already a few free resources on there, and I'm going to be adding more.
Great, great. Well, it was a pleasure having you. Listen, guys, if you want to hear more stuff like this, make sure you're in our Facebook group. And make sure you're following Recruit University on all of our social channels as well. We're going to post this on YouTube. We're going to put it on TikTok and everywhere else. The links will all be in the comments. Kristi, it was a pleasure having you. I'm looking forward to reading the book.
Thanks so much for having me.